Loni, our second case is out of San Francisco, California, where a father allegedly shot his son and then turned the gun on himself. And this apparently happened after getting into an argument with the child's mother over vaccines. According to court records pertaining to the custody battle between the parents over this child, there were many arguments over whether to vaccinate or to not. Now, we are not going to debate vaccines on this program. We are not a medical show. We're not a political show. We are a crime show. And any references and quotes that we make to vaccines are coming directly from documents that were filed as part of this custody battle. So these statements are going to give us insight into what each parent was thinking and feeling at the time that may give us some information as to why an innocent child, a 9-year-old boy, was murdered. And sadly, we see in a lot of these custody battles that they end so violently. It's as if, no, I'm taking the child. No, I'm taking the child. And really, at the end of the day, Loni, is it not a battle over control and possession? That's really what it comes down to, screwing the other parent?
Yeah. Obviously, I was a criminal prosecutor. So we dealt with crimes and stuff, but we always talked about how some of the worst violence that happened was from the family law courts, because this is where families are going through divorces and custody hearings. And people who just assume that your whole life you get to be in control of your home, your intimate life, your children, how you're going to raise your children. Once you go through a divorce, that now brings in the courts to dictate that. If the parents can't agree on this, and I always counsel parents who are going through a divorce, if you can't agree together, a third party, a judge, is going to come in and make those decisions for you. And neither side may be happy, but there's clearly going to be one side that's definitely not happy. And because the emotions are so high, and because people want to have control over their families, love their kids and feel very strongly about it, sometimes the anger and the emotions can get so high. And then when we're talking about ex-spouses and there's fighting between spouses, many times it's like, if I'm not the one in control here, I'm not going to let you be in control. And that's how you end up to deadly violence. Horrible.
If I can't have the child, neither will you. So instead, what's the solution? Kill the child? Yeah. It's such a violent end to what sounds like, based on court records, years of fighting between these two. And one can only imagine the damage that was done to this little boy because of what was going on between the parents. So let's get into the details of the case as we know them from the court records. On January 13th, the bodies of Stephen O'Loughlin, 49 years old, and his 9-year-old son, Pierce O'Loughlin, were found by police. Police were called to the apartment in San Francisco because the little boy had not shown up for school. So the mother made a welfare call to police, said, please go to the father's apartment, check on my son. And that is when police found a murder-suicide crime scene. It appears that the father shot the son, killed him, and then turned the gun on himself. Loni, this is what I don't get. You know, if you are angry, despondent, if you want to commit this incredibly violent act, why kill the child? I'm not advocating kill yourself, but my God, why the child? The child is the innocent one here.
Right. You know, when we see this between the spouses, when one ex-spouse kills the other spouse, it's because, you know, they're getting away from me. They're losing control. You know, if I can't have this person, no one else can. In the parents, it's a little bit more layered than that. It's similar to that, but it's also, I believe I know what's best for this child. And if that doesn't happen because somebody else, you know, intervenes, the courts come in, the law takes over. Sometimes this is the mentality. I love them so much. I love this child so much that I don't want that horrible thing, whatever it is going to be, happen to them. So it's better. I'm saving them. This is what you hear. I'm saving them from this horrible thing. So I'm going to take them out, and then they end up taking themselves. Clearly, something is snapped, or there's mental illness or something. It's obviously not ordered thinking that's going on.
No.
But it's the same thing of that control of, I'm not going to let something else happen to my child that I don't agree with. This is my child. I will be the one that determines. And if that means I have to take them off this earth, that's what they're going to do.
This is by no means any form of rational thinking. Absolutely not. And while we're trying to figure out if there was an inciting incident, it appears that this case was scheduled for trial this week, and then there was a postponement until March. We don't know if that is the thing that just triggered it. It's like, I can't, I won't. We don't know, but that's the only thing we can see in the records.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's really important to look at, because when you find out that this divorce happened in 2016, so it's been years of this couple fighting over how they were going to raise their child. And it's gone back and forth the entire time. They'd had joint custody, but now the mother was trying to get sole custody because she wanted to be able to make these decisions over his medical care without the father intervening. And the day before the murder-suicide, they were due in court. It was actually supposed to be the trial date.
Right.
But what happened in court was they postponed the trial until March, and they got a concession from the father. He said, he agreed, okay, my son can be vaccinated. That was the first time he's ever conceded to that. It was this big fight that had been going on. Oh, my son's going to be able to be vaccinated. So you figure after that, he goes home that night. He's with his son. He's thinking, this thing that I have fought against for so long, because I so strongly believe that it is dangerous to my son's health, is now going to be forced on my son. And not only that, but in a few months, I have to go to court and maybe lose custody over my son. This is just too much. And then the next day, he takes this horrific action.
It's as if he saw no other way but this, that he had lost it all or was potentially about to lose it all. It's shocking. It's shocking. So he was in this custody battle with his ex-wife, the mother of Pierce, Leslie Hu. The custody dispute, as you said, had been going on since the 2016 divorce. The mother did want that sole custody, sole legal guardianship of Pierce. And, when you make these arguments before a court, because obviously you can't decide, so you are arguing before a judge saying, no, judge, I'm right. No, judge, I'm right. This is what I want. You start putting a lot of details, sometimes your family's dirty laundry, some of it truthful, some of it is manufactured, as we know. Things get very, very nasty in divorces and custody battles. So according to court records, the father's position on vaccines led to several disputes between the couple. The mother claimed that the father was paranoid and obsessed with the son's overall health, that he was hypersensitive to everything having to do with his son's health. The father argued, this is the father's position, that Pierce had severe side effects from getting vaccinated as a baby that included weight loss and diarrhea. So from the father's perspective, he was afraid of what would happen to his son if he were to be further vaccinated. That's the father's perspective. The mother said that she wanted sole custody so she could vaccinate the child without any interference from the father. So it appears that while really what they're fighting about is control in the child, the two of them decided to make it about whether to vaccinate or not. That is the issue which they chose to dispute in the court.
Right.
So, and again, we're pulling from the court records here. And it's interesting because it's all of the things that you've said in the past, that you've done in the past, that will tell the story of what was going on. And the court records provide us with a narrative of what was going on between these two. So I'm going to quote now from the father's attorney, this again, coming from the records. Quote, "This is not an anti-vax parent seeking to prevent his child from being vaccinated. For the average child, the risk to benefit ratio for vaccines is in favor of vaccinations. For a certain subset of society, however, this is not the case. Pierce is one of those people. So that is the argument that the father's side was making in court. The mother fires back, and in September, in a court filing in September, this is what she said in court records, quote, that his stance on vaccinations has taken on a cult-like tone. So she starts attacking the father's mental health. And given that he just this week murdered his son and turned the gun on himself, I think there is some reasonable question about his mental stability. Mm-hmm. How any of this factors into it is to be determined. So the mother says that the father was obsessed with the boy, that he was, quote, videotaping Pierce's breathing several times a day in case he had any ailments, like if there was a stuffy nose. So here's a dad who appears to be, based on these records, very, very fearful of his son's health. So I think that there was a real fear. And what is unclear is whether the child was healthy or not and had health issues. Again, to be determined as part of this investigation. The mother claims that from 2012 to 2016, that Stephen O'Loughlin paid thousands of dollars to a, quote, New Age self-help group that believed the government was using mind control on people. He attended therapy sessions with leaders of this group. The mother is the one who describes this as a cult. The mother also claims that the father was inherently paranoid, that he suffered from paranoia, and that all these other factors were feeding into that paranoia. So obviously, you know, when she makes these accusations, she is the one who's using the terms of cults, mind control. She is trying to paint a picture before the judge, right? That he is mentally unstable.
Right.
And therefore cannot take care of the child.
Yeah. And you see this in custody disputes. And it's hard to always know what the truth is. Like you said, you have two very emotional parents fighting for control over their son's health decisions. And sometimes they're telling the absolute truth. And that's why they are so desperate. And that's why they're in court. And sometimes they're exaggerating it or embellishing it. We just don't know for sure. But like you said, looking now, 2020 hindsight, after the horrific event of the murder-suicide, you realize how far pushed the father was mentally and emotionally to get to that point. Yes.
And so, of course, you know, at the end of the day, two people are dead. There is a 9-year-old boy who is the true innocent one in all of this, who should not have been murdered. His life should not have been taken from him. He should not have been murdered by his father. I fear for what those last minutes or hours could have been like for the boy, because we don't know if he had any idea what his father was about to do.
No.
Was the father sharing this mental torment, right? That he was tormented, whether he was sharing that with the child or whether it happened very quickly. Did he see the gun coming toward him? I don't know. No matter what, that is the crime here. That's the crime here. So obviously, there has been so much of this is in the public because it was in the court records. We have a statement from the mother's attorney about the murder-suicide. And this was published in the Chronicle in San Francisco. Quote, I think it is undeniable that Pierce's father suffered from untreated mental illness, which resulted in his taking the life of his son and his own life. I believe that he did this horrid act in order to exercise the ultimate control over Leslie. Close quote. That's the mother.
It's interesting because I was researching them as a couple, and, you know, they were both very high-powered, intelligent, successful individuals in their careers. He was a VP at a firm. When they got married, Their wedding was in the, wedding style magazine. They were involved in a lot of, big charity events there in San Francisco. So you start out with this, beautiful fairy tale wedding and, this romantic story. And then along comes a child, and whether it was just their differences in child rearing, or perhaps there was this mental illness or paranoia aspect, but it goes so tragically wrong. And it's just such a sad story, especially for the son, who you would think this beautiful baby being born into this, fairy tale existence is going to have this amazing life. And it was just the opposite.
When you think about it, they had all of the resources that so many families wish that they could to give their
Yeah.
child everything in the world. And at the end of the day, they squandered the last few years fighting and bickering and just using the child as a human tug of war, pulling in each direction. And ultimately, that child is dead. The father killed him. The father then killed himself. It's a horrendous tragedy. Horrendous tragedy.